Hi guys, good morning everyone. In the last session, we discussed about how to handle exceptions in the WebMVC application. Online students, is my voice audible? Could you please confirm? Online students?
Yes, sir, it is audible.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, perfect. Good. Guys, in the last class, we discussed about what is exception handling in the WebMVC application. Getting exceptions is very common when our code is in the execution process, right? When our code is executing, there is a chance of getting exception. It can be a arithmetic exception or null pointer exception or SQL exception or typecast exception, array index out of bound exception. There are n number of exceptions available in the Java. Based on the situation, we are going to get the exception. Whenever we get the exception in our application, it will display exception stack trace to the client, saying that 500 error it is going to display to the client with the exception information. If we display exception information to the client, client will get shocked because client don't know what is that exception. Client don't understand what is exception. Instead of displaying exception stack trace to the client, we need to display some meaningful message to the client. So to display a meaningful message to the client, we are going to use exception handling technique in the Spring Web MVC. To handle exceptions in the WebMVC, we have two options. One is called local exception handling approach. Second one is global exception handling approach. Local exception handling means if you write this method within the controller, that will execute only for that controller. That will work only for that controller. If you don't want for only one controller, if you want for all the controllers in the application, all the classes in the application, then you need to go for global exception handling. We need to go for global exception handling. What is the meaning of that global exception handling? Global exception handling means it will handle the exception occurred. It will handle the exceptions occurred in the entire application. Good. Then we have seen how to make Jetty as a default embedded container. In the Spring Boot, by default, we are getting Tomcat as a embedded container. Spring Boot will support for 3 embedded containers, guys. What is the meaning of embedded container first of all? What is the meaning of embedded container by default? Come on. Whenever we create the boot web application with the web starter, boot is going to provide one container for us, that is a server. You no need to deploy boot application to the external server. Boot will provide its own server. So here Spring Boot supports for 3 types of servers. One is called Tomcat, second one is Jetty, third one is Netty. When you create boot application, by default you are going to get the Tomcat server. So you can change from Tomcat to Jetty also by using these changes in the pom.xml. Web starter, then we need to exclude that Tomcat starter from the web starter and we need to add Jetty starter dependency in the pom.xml. Okay, so as of now, we learned these annotations in our Spring Boot application. One is controller. Controller is the annotation to represent our Java class as a Spring controller, which will deal with request and response. Next one, request mapping. If you want to map your method to URL pattern, you can go for request mapping. You can use that annotation at the class level as well as at the method level. The next one, get mapping. It is used to map our method to get request. Okay, post mapping to map our method to post request. So when you want to deal with the form submissions, then you are going to use post request. To map the method to post request, we will use post mapping. Then request param. What is the meaning of request param? It is used to read the data from the query parameters. Next one, path variable. To read the data from path parameters. Response body. controller want to send direct response to the client, then we will use response body. Controller advice. Controller advice is used to handle global exceptions, right? If you want to deal with all the exceptions in the entire application, okay, exception can occur in any class. Then I want to handle those exceptions. Then we can go for controller advice annotation. The next one, exception handler. So it is used to handle particular exception. We will write this at the method level. When exception occurred, then that method is going to execute. Good. And I have given one assignment. Are you able to implement this? How many of you completed? 1, 2, 3, 4 people. Daily only 4 people are doing. What about the remaining? What about the remaining? You need to develop one form. We already know how to develop the form. You need to implement form validations for that. Then whatever the form data we are getting, to that email ID, we need to send one success email. Simple. If you just go to Google and if you type sending email use in Spring Boot, just send email using Spring Boot. N number of examples are there in the internet along with the code. To send the email, this is the dependency we need to add in the form.xml. Then the code that we need to write, this is the logic. That's it. Just 5 minutes of time if you spend, you can complete that task. If you don't have that 5 minutes also, that means you are lazy. If you are not doing this assignment means you are lazy. Remember, you are not doing the course for me. You are doing the course for you. So whatever the assignments I'm giving, the reason is self-learning. You need to learn the concept on your own. That will help you to survive in the industry tomorrow. Self-learning skill is very important. Okay. Next one. As of now, we are using TimeLeaf as a presentation technology. As of now, we are using TimeLeaf as a presentation technology. By default, HTML pages will use for static content display. In order to display dynamic content in the HTML, we are using TimeLeaf. Now, I want to use JSP as a presentation technology. I want to use JSP as a presentation technology. So let us create one simple MVC application, file, new, Spring Starter project. Web MVC JSP application. Right. So in this application, I don't want to use a TimeLeaf. I want to use JSP as a presentation technology just for understanding purpose. How it will work when we are using JSPs for the presentation. You can use either JSP for the presentation or you can use TimeLeaf for the presentation. Either one, any one. You can develop complete UI with JSP. If you don't want JSP, then you can go for TimeLeaf as a presentation. Good. Next, I'm using web dev tools. That's it. Web dependency I'm using, dev tools dependency I'm using. Do I need to select a TimeLeaf? Not required. Search here. Do we have any dependency for JSP? We don't have any dependency for JSP. Okay, nothing is available. I'm just creating my project with the dev tools as well as web. What is the purpose of web? To create Spring Web MVC application. Click on next, click on finish. Fine guys. Project is created. My project is created. Start class also available. Let me run it once and check it. Is it running as expected or not? Yes, application is working as expected. It is using Tomcat as a container with port number 8080. Okay, good. Let me create one controller class here. New controller. Let me keep that inside a package, message controller. @controller annotation, import that package. Then you can write the methods inside the controller. Public string get welcome message. Right? Just read. I want to send some data to the controller, from controller to UI. How to send the data from controller to UI, guys? How to send the data from controller to UI? By using modal attribute. By using modal object, right? By using modal object, we are going to send the data from controller to UI. So let us use modal dot add attribute of key comma value. Key comma value. So here key is something like a message, welcome to Spring Boot, something like this. Just one message I want to send to the UI to see whether it is working with the JSP or not. @get mapping. Let us map this method to URL pattern called welcome. So if I use either JSP or Timeleaf, any difference in the controller? Any difference in the controller when I go for JSP or Timeleaf? No. Because in the Spring Web MVC, controllers are loosely coupled from the presentation technology. You can use either Timeleaf or you can use JSP. Controller will be same. Okay. Controller method will take modal object as a parameter and is returning view name as a return type. So whenever a GET request comes to the /welcome, it will store the data to the modal. It is a map. It is storing the data in the form of key and value, and it is returning index page. Okay. Now go to our project. Go to our project, SRC main web app. Inside the web app, earlier when we are working with the Timeleaf, under templates we created the view file. But now the view files will be created in the web app folder because it is a JSP file. Go to the web app, new. I'm going to create one folder in the web app with a name called views. You can give any name for the folder. It's not a problem. I'm giving the folder name as views. Now go here, next, other. I want to create JSP. The option is not coming. So what we can do? Right click, new file. So what we need to do? We need to create a file with a name called index.jsp. Okay. So with this, my JSP file got created. Okay. Open it with a system editor. Okay. It is by default opening. It is opening in the VS Code IDE. My JSP file is open. Is there any content available? Let's simply get it from Google. Go to getbootstrap.com or you can get it from JSP page. JSP page. Okay. Some sample JSP page we can get. Learn JSP request like this. You can write any logic inside that JSP API, scriptlet tag directly. They are writing this inside the JSP. You can go to bootstrap.com, getbootstrap.com, docs, get this second one and keep it. Okay, this is our index.jsp. H1 hello world is available. When you configure JSP as your presentation technology, I want to access that message, guys. In order to access that message, we will be using $of message. $of message. It is the key which is sending from the controller to the UI. To access the value of the key, we are using $of message. Okay, that's it. Now $of message is available. And one more change we need to do. we need to configure view resolver. We need to configure view resolver. What is view resolver? View resolver will tell you where view files available in our application. Where the view files available in the application will be represented by view resolver. So for time leaf, it is not required. For time leaf, it is not required, but for the JSP, it is required. Spring dot MVC dot view dot prefix is equal to /views. Prefix nothing but the location where our view files are available. My view files are available inside the views folder. Whatever the folder name you give here, same name you need to configure here. Then next one, spring dot MVC dot view dot suffix is equal to dot JSP. Spring dot MVC dot view dot suffix is equal to dot JSP. So we are telling that the extension of the file is a JSP file. The extension of the file is a JSP file. Okay. So I created one controller class. I created one controller which is mapped to Spring controller by using annotation. I have one method. My method is mapped to get request with /welcome. Okay. I'm taking model object as a parameter to send the data from controller to UI. Then index.jsp file. My controller returning the name as the index. I created a file called index.jsp. In that I am accessing the key by using $of_message. Then inside the properties file, I'm configuring my view resolver information. What is the prefix of your view? What is the suffix of your view? Prefix nothing but the location where your view files are available. Suffix nothing but the extension of your view file. Okay, let's run this application and try this. Refresh, right click, run as boot application. Server already running with that port number. Stop it and start it again. Right click, run as boot app. Okay, our application started. Good. Observe carefully, guys, what will happen when I send the request. What will happen when I'm sending the request? Localhost colon 8080/welcome. Before that, let's go to our downloads. Okay. Now, today, is there any file which is in the downloads? Today, there is no file in the downloads. Good. Localhost colon 8080/welcome. When I click on this request, what happened, guys? Page is loading in the browser or page is downloading in the system? Page is downloading in the system. I'm sending the request to my URL, which is localhost colon 8080/welcome. When I send the request, the welcome page is getting downloaded. Actually, that page should be rendered on the browser. We should get the response on the browser. We are not getting the response on the browser. Whatever the page is there, it is downloading. When you create JSP as a presentation in the Spring Web MVC, when you send the request to the controller, the JSP page is downloading in the system. It is not rendering in the browser. The reason, by default, embedded server cannot understand what is JSP. Are you getting my point? So embedded server is working with HTML directly. If there is a HTML, it is rendering the HTML. But when it is a JSP, is it rendering the JSP or it is not rendering the JSP? It is not rendering the JSP. What it is doing? What it is doing, guys? It is downloading our JSP. How to resolve this problem? To resolve this problem, we need to add one dependency in the pom.xml that is called embed Jasper dependency. If you are working with JSP as a presentation technology, only WebMVC starter is not sufficient. Along with that starter, we need to add one more dependency in the project, which is called Tomcat Embed Jasper. Okay, Tomcat Embed Jasper dependency is required. Let me take this dependency, copy this one, go to our pom.xml. You understand, right? If I don't add this dependency, what is happening in our project? What is happening in our project if I don't add this dependency? Instead of rendering the JSP, it is downloading the JSP. Instead of rendering the JSP, it is downloading the JSP. Okay, I have added Tomcat Embed Jasper dependency. Stop the application. Let's do the Maven build. Maven update the project. A new dependency added. Let's go for Maven update. Project is updated. Then refresh. Right click, run as boot application. Go to the console. Application started. Clear the console. Go to browser. Now let's hit the URL /welcome. Now is it loading now? So earlier what happened? Earlier our page got downloaded. Now our page is rendering on the browser. So if you are using if you want to develop your WebMVC application with JSP as a presentation technology, two things are new. One is adding Tomcat Embed Jasper dependency in the pom.xml, and the second one is view resolver configuration. What is view resolver in the WebMVC? View resolver will tell where our view files are available. So spring.mvc.view.prefix is equal to /views. That is the folder where my presentation files are available. Spring.mvc.view.suffix.jsp, that is extension for my JSP page. Good. So how to develop Spring WebMVC with JSP as a presentation technology. Spring WebMVC app with JSP. Earlier we used TimeLeaf as a presentation. First time we are using JSP as a presentation technology. So what are the steps we need to follow? Create boot app with below dependencies. What are those dependencies? First one is web starter, second one is DevTools, third one is Tomcat Embed Jasper. Tomcat Embed Jasper. So can we select this dependency at the time of creating the project? No. In the IDE, that dependency not showing. Then how we deal with this dependency? Get it from MVN repository. Okay. Get it from MVN repository. So it by default at the time of project creation, you cannot select the dependency. You need to get the dependency from the MVN repository. You see this one? I have downloaded, I have added the dependency in my pom.xml. Tomcat Embed Jasper. What is the purpose of Tomcat Embed Jasper dependency? What is the purpose of Tomcat Embed Jasper? It is used to render JSP files in the browser. Our embedded server will not render by default. So that's why we are adding extra dependency. Then next one, configure view resolver in application.properties file. So what is that view resolver? View resolver will tell you where the view files available in our application. What is the prefix and what is the suffix? Okay. Create controller class. Create controller class with a required methods. So this is my message controller. Whether it is a TimeLeaf or JSP, in the controller there is no difference because controllers are loosely coupled from presentation technology. So when the controller is available, presentation technology can be TimeLeaf or can be JSP also. Then Once the controller is ready, then what is the next step? Create view file. Create view file, which is index.jsp. Where we are creating our view file? Inside web app, inside views, inside index.jsp. Why we are creating views here? We are creating a folder. We are configuring that as a prefix. It's not mandatory to create the folder, but it's recommended, so that all our presentation files will be available in one location. Good. So now here spring.mvc.view.prefix is equal to /views, mvc.view.suffix is equal to .jsp. So create controller class with required methods. Message controller. Create view file. Create view file under web app views, then index.jsp. What we are doing in the index.jsp? We are just adding dollar of message. What is the meaning of dollar of message, guys? What is the meaning of dollar of message? We are just printing the value of the key. Key is message. How we are accessing the key? Dollar of key. Then we are going to get the value which is associated with that key. We are getting the value which is associated with that key. Are you able to follow this? Good. Create controller with required methods. With this, we are able to understand how to work with JSP as a presentation technology. Add embed Jasper dependency. Then configure view resolver dependency. For example, here my controller method is returning index. Let me do one thing. Let me create one HTML also with the same name. Let us see which one will be loaded. New file. I'm creating a file with a name called index.html. Index.html. Instead of JSP, now I am writing index.html. Hello world. This is index.html page. In this HTML page, how do we access? th:\text is equal to dollar of message. Okay. This is index.jsp. This is index.jsp page. This is index.html page. So if you want to work with a TimeLeaf, you need to add TimeLeaf starter. TimeLeaf starter should be added. So in the previous project, we have TimeLeaf starter. I want to check when we have both TimeLeaf and JSP, which one is getting loaded. Okay. Now, so in the 17th application, I want to see the behavior of the WebMVC when we are having both JSP and TimeLeaf as a presentation. So what my controller is doing now? What my controller is doing now? It is returning index. So what is there for index? Index.html is available and index.jsp is also available. So now I want to understand, is it loading HTML or is it loading JSP? I want to see the behavior of the controller. With the same name, there are two views available. One is HTML view using TimeLeaf. Another one is JSP view is available. Let's run this application. Refresh, run as boot app. Application started with the port number 8080. Clear the console. Now send the request. Which one is getting the highest priority? TimeLeaf. Okay, if you use both TimeLeaf and JSP, which one is loading? That means Spring Boot first checking, do we have the TimeLeaf in the project? If TimeLeaf is available, it will not check for the JSP. It will load only TimeLeaf. If TimeLeaf is not available, then only it will check for the JSP. So in this scenario, we have a controller. Our controller is returning the name as a index. Then the templates index.html is available. this page is loading. Suppose if we don't have a file with index.html, then it will go for index.jsp. Okay, so if you add both Thymeleaf and JSP as a presentation, which one is getting the highest priority? Which one is getting the highest priority? Thymeleaf is getting the highest priority. Are you guys clear with this one? Very good. Okay, so you understand how to use JSP as a presentation technology? How to use JSP as a presentation technology in the WebMVC? We need to add one dependency, which is called Tomcat Embed Jasper. If we don't add Tomcat Embed Jasper, then what will happen? Come on. If we don't add Tomcat Embed Jasper dependency, then JSP file will be downloaded in browser. Okay, so remember that point. When you are working with JSP as a presentation technology, Tomcat Embed Jasper is required. You need to get it from the MVN repository. Otherwise, your JSP file will be downloaded. And we need to configure View Resolver. View Resolver is used to tell where our presentation files are available. Good. Suppose if I create both index.html and index.jsp, which one is loading first? If we create both index.html and index.jsp, then it will load HTML page with the highest priority. So Thymeleaf and JSP, which is having highest priority in the WebMVC? Thymeleaf is having the highest. Nowadays, guys, in the industry, nobody is using JSP. JSP is outdated in the market. People are not using JSP for the presentation part. Good. Fine. So we are clear how to work with JSP as a presentation. Next one, there is a concept called actuators in Spring Boot. What is the next concept, guys? Actuators in the Spring Boot. What is actuator? Why we need to go for actuator? So if you remember, in the initial classes of the Spring Boot, we discussed what is the Spring Boot, what are the advantages with the Spring Boot. Can you tell me what is the Spring Boot? What is Spring Boot? Spring Boot is an approach. Spring Boot is an approach to develop Spring-based applications with less configuration. Spring Framework is already available. Spring Framework came in the market in the year of 2003-2004. Spring Boot came into market in 2014 or 2015, right? So when the Spring is already available, why Spring Boot came into market? In the Spring, you need to configure everything. Programmer is responsible for configuration in the Spring. That is a common for every project. That's why Spring Boot came into market with a auto configuration technique. What is auto configuration? What is auto configuration? Spring Boot is going to identify the configuration which is required for your application. It is going to identify the configuration which is required for your application. Okay, good. Here in the Spring Boot, there are some advantages available. Can you tell me advantages? What are the advantages with the Spring Boot? Form starters, version conflict solution, auto configuration, embedded server, and actuators. Rapid application development. Embedded server is one advantage. Actuator is another advantage. Embedded server we already understood. Now we are trying to understand what is actuator in the Spring Boot. So general definition for the actuators. Actuators are used to get production ready features of our application. Actuators is a concept in the Spring Boot. Actuators are used to get production ready features of our application. Let us see the official documentation of the Spring, what they are telling about actuators. Go here. Actuator in the Spring Boot. Let's go to Spring docs.io. No. Can you read this? Spring, this is not my definition, guys. This is official documentation of the Spring. Spring Boot actuator. Actuators are used for production ready features. So can you read this? Read this. You tell me what you understand from that point. Spring Boot actuator that is used to get the production ready features. So let's check it. Read the point, read the statement and tell me what you understand from that statement. Spring Boot includes number of additional features to help you monitor and manage your application when it's pushed to production. That means when your application is deployed, then it will provide some features to monitor and manage your application. Actuators are used to get production ready features of our application. Actuators will help us in monitoring and managing our application. Actuators will help us in monitoring and managing our application. Actuators are used to get the production ready features of our application. Actuators will help us in monitoring and managing our application. What is the meaning of monitoring our application? Monitoring our application, nothing but getting health of our application, check the health of our application and check how many beans loaded, what are the config properties loaded, what are the config props loaded by our application, what are the URL patterns, what URL patterns available in our application, what URL patterns available for our application, thread dump of our application, thread dump of application, heap dump of application, heap dump of application. These all are providing by actuators. These are called production ready features of our application. My application is deployed in the server. When my application deployed in the server, customers are accessing my application. What is the health of our application? How many beans loaded by our application? How many threads are running in our application? What is the heap information of our application? What are the configuration properties loaded? What are the URL patterns available? All that information we can access by using actuators. Actuators are used to get the production ready features of application. Production ready features nothing but this information. What is health of your application? Health of application, how many beans loaded, what are the configuration properties loaded, what are the URL patterns available, what is thread dump of the application, and what is heap dump of the application. All these things we can access by using actuators. Now, in order to work with the actuators, enable production ready features. In order to enable production ready features for our application, we need to configure one dependency, which is called actuator starter. How we have JPA starter, web starter, Tomcat starter, mail starter. Similarly, there is a starter called boot starter actuator available. If you want to work with actuator in your application, then you need to add Spring Boot starter actuator dependency. Once after adding actuator dependency, we need to enable the actuator endpoints. In order to enable the actuator endpoints, again, we need to write some configuration in the properties file. Let's see this one. Let me add this actuator. At the time of creating the project only, you can select this dependency. Okay. So let me create one project, new starter project, 18th application, actuator app. Actuators application. Next one, I'm selecting web starter, dev tools. Then what is the dependency? We need to add one more dependency called actuator dependency. What is this actuator? To monitor and manage our application. That's it. I have just added actuator dependency in the pom.xml. Go to pom.xml, boot version, parent version, Java version is available. Actuator starter, web starter, DevTools starter, Tomcat starter is available. This is the new dependency we have added. So now let's run our application, refresh, run as boot app. Now you see here what it is telling. It is exposing one endpoint beneath base path / actuator. Okay, / actuator is the endpoint available which is used to monitor our application. Now let's go to browser. Let's do this. Localhost colon 8080 / actuator. When you say / actuator, what are the URLs it is giving? It is giving a URL called health of the application. Now you take this URL and you hit this URL. What it is saying now? The project health is up. That means the project is running successfully. There is no issue in the runtime. Suppose if there is no memory, if the project is having some problem, it will show the project health as down, up, down. Up means the project is up and running. It is executing as expected. If the project is not running as expected, it will show the health status as down. Okay. So by default, whenever you add actuator dependency, it is showing health URL of our application. Only one end, this health URL, this health is called one actuator endpoint. This is called one actuator endpoint. So by default, health endpoint will be available when you add the actuator dependency. Along with the health, I want other features also. How many beans are loaded? What properties are loaded? How many URLs available? What is the heap information? What is thread information? I want to get all that data. In order to enable the other actuator endpoints, we need to make some change in the properties file. Go to this properties file, management.web.exposure.include is equal to star. This property will tell that enable all the actuator endpoints. If you add only actuator dependency, it is enabling only health endpoint. Not only health, I want other endpoints also. If you want to enable other endpoints also with the actuator, you need to write this property in the properties file. Management.endpoints.web.exposure.include star. Everything I want to include related to actuator. So earlier, before I'm writing this property, it was showing only health related information. Now let's refresh, run our application, run as boot app. Value must contain valid characters. Maven, update the project, force update. Right click, run as boot app. Yes, it started, guys. Now refresh this URL. Now can you see? Earlier, how many URLs it was showing? Only health URL it was showing. Now it is showing health, it is showing info, config properties, loggers, heap dump, thread dump, beans. Right? Now check the health of the application. What is the health status? Up. Let me go for config props. Config props is a URL which will tell you what are the properties loaded by our application. So we have the profiles concept, which profile is loaded, what are the properties are available in the properties file. It will display that. Then we have one more property which is called beans property. What is the purpose of beans property? What are the classes it will loaded by IOC? What classes loaded by IOC, it is going to display that information. Okay, so if you hit this URL, it will tell you what are the endpoint URLs. Thread dump, how many threads are running. So if you hit this thread dump URL, you will get the information about the threads. What are the threads running in our application? What is the status of the threads? Like this, you can monitor and manage our application by using actuator endpoints. So heap dump nothing but whenever you hit this heap dump URL, it will be downloading heap information in a file. Heap dump file is downloaded. To monitor the heap dump, there are some Java profiler tools available. So if by using that tool, we can monitor heap information of our application. What will be there in the heap? Objects will be available. How many objects are created? How much memory used by objects in the JVM, how much memory is free. That information you can get by using heap dump. Thread dump will tell you how many threads are running for our application. So like this, we are having actuators. Actuators are used to monitor and manage our application. Spring Boot is providing actuator to get the production ready features of our application. Once your application is deployed, so you need to monitor your application. In order to monitor our application, we are doing two changes here. One is in the pom.xml, we are adding actuator dependency. That is one point. What is the second point? We are enabling this property. So management.endpoints.web.exposure.include is equal to star. Let me show you this once again. Let's run this application and see the console message clearly. Run as boot application. Okay. Now, can you read this message? How many endpoints are exposed, guys? If I don't add that property in the properties file, if I don't add that property in the properties file, only one endpoint is enabled. If I add that property, it is enabling 13 endpoints. Okay. Now go to browser and hit this URL /actuator. Okay. All the 13 endpoints information is displaying. I want everything, but I don't want beans endpoint. I want to remove that. Okay, include is available, exclude is available. What is the meaning of include? Use that also. Exclude means remove that. Now I want to remove one actuator endpoint. I want to remove one actuator endpoint. So for this, management dot endpoints dot web dot exposure dot exclude is equal to beans. Exclude beans. I want everything, but I don't want beans. So to include everything, we are using star. To exclude only beans, we are writing exclude is equal to beans. I want all the properties, but I don't want beans property. I want all the properties, but I don't want beans property. Beans endpoint. Earlier, it was showing 13 endpoints are exposed. Now I excluded beans. It should show 12 endpoints got exposed. Run as boot application. Go to console. What it is saying now? Earlier it was 13. Now it is saying only 12. The reason, earlier we included everything. Now we excluded beans endpoint. So you understand what is the purpose of actuator in the Spring Boot? What is the purpose of actuator in the Spring Boot? Actuators are used to monitor and manage our application. So generally people will call it as production ready features of the application. When the application is deployed in the production, monitoring is very, very important. How many beans loaded? What are the URL patterns available? What is the heap dump? What is the thread dump? What classes are loaded? What are the metrics of the application? To get all such kind of information, we are going to use actuators. So in order to work with the actuators, we need to add a dependency in the pom.xml. If you add the dependency in the pom.xml, by default, only one endpoint will come. That is a health endpoint. Not only health, I want all the other endpoints also. Web.exposure.include is equal to star. When you give star, total 13 endpoints will be enabled. From the 13, I don't want one endpoint. Then you can go for exclude endpoint. Okay. Then let us see here. Management dot endpoint dot shutdown is equal to shutdown dot enabled is equal to true. So there is a special endpoint is there, shutdown endpoint. Shutdown endpoint is used to stop the application from the URL. So as of now, we are sending a request to the application to get the response. But you can send a request to stop the server also. For that, there is an endpoint called shutdown endpoint is available. By default, shutdown endpoint is in the disable mode. That means if I send a request to the URL, my application should be stopped. For that, there is an endpoint called shutdown. In the recent interview, they asked this question. I want to stop my server by sending a request. Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. How? This is the answer. By using shutdown endpoint, we can stop the server also. As of now, if you want to stop the server, what we are doing? We are going to our IDE. We are stopping the server. Without going to the IDE, I want to stop the server. For that, we need to enable shutdown endpoint. But remember, all the endpoints are binded to get request. All the endpoints are binded to get request. Shutdown endpoint is binded to post request. You cannot send this request from the browser directly to stop the server. So you need to send a post request if you want to shut down the server. To send the post request, we will use Postman tool. There is a tool called Postman tool. By using that Postman tool, we can send post request to the server. Are you able to follow this? Good. Let's write this one, refresh, run this, run as boot app. Now, total how many endpoints enabled? Why 13? It should be 12 now. With this, 13 will come. But here I have excluded beans. So total 12 will come. Now shutdown is added. So total 13 endpoints are enabled. So let's go to browser, localhost : 8080/actuator/beans. So what is the meaning of this one? Beans is available or not available? Why not available? It is excluded. Now let's go for some metrics of the application. I'm accessing metrics of the application by using endpoint. If I type this URL, if I hit enter, a get request is going to the actuator. We are getting the response. Similarly, I want to send a request to the shutdown. Shutdown. Am I getting the response? What it is saying? Boss, you are sending a get request for the post request method. Shutdown endpoint is binded to post request, but you are sending a get request. That will not work out. So now, if I want to stop my server, what I need to do? I need to send post request. From the browser, can I send the post request directly? No. For that, what we need? Postman. There is a tool called Postman tool. Let's go to Google and download Postman. Okay, download Postman. Windows, download it. Once the REST API started, every day we are going to work with the Postman. Just go to Google, download the Postman software. It is downloading as a exe file. We need to install this software in our system. I'm trying to install the Postman. Let us see. Without this Postman, I can't send the post request now. Yes, create free account or continue with the lightweight API client. Okay, without creating the account, we are able to use. I downloaded the Postman tool. The Postman tool looks like this. So here you have a option. Do you want to send get request or post request? If I want to send a get request, then I will say localhost colon 8080 slash actuator slash metrics. Click on send. Am I able to get the response? Metrics of the application in the JSON format we are getting. Now slash config props. Get the configuration properties of our application. Click on send. All the data is coming in the JSON format. When you hit that URL in the browser, that is not looking good because it is a JSON format. So if you send the same request from the Postman, very clearly it is displaying the data in the JSON format. Okay, good. Now send the request, config props available. Let me go for thread dump. Click on send. When I send thread dump, threads ID, thread name is available, thread count. What are the thread state, runnable state, stack trace available. All the threads which are running in the JVM, that information, 3600 lines of JSON data we got as a response. So whenever you hit the thread dump URL, whenever you hit the health, then what it is saying guys, status up. The application is up and running. All the endpoints are binded to get request. What about shutdown? Only that is a special endpoint which is binded to post request. Okay. Now see, my server is running. My server is up and running, guys. So the server status is running. Let's go to Postman. Go to post slash shutdown. Click on send. Shutting down by the server got stopped. Okay, go to our application. See this one. Server is running or server is terminated. Can we stop our application also by sending a request from the browser from the Postman? Yes. What type of request? Post request. So we need to enable shutdown. By default, it is not enabled, guys. If you want that functionality, then you need to enable shutdown endpoint in your project. That shutdown endpoint is binded to post request. To send the post request, for that we are using Postman software. Select the request type as post and give the URL pattern for that. Okay. So with this we understood what is actuator. Can you tell me what is actuator? Actuators are used to get the production ready features of our application. Actuators will help us in monitoring and managing our application. How can we do that? We can check health of the application. What are the bins loaded? What are the config properties loaded? What are the URL patterns available? Thread dump of the application and heap dump of the application. To work with actuators, we need to add below form starter. We need to add below form starter. Go to our project form.xml file. We added one dependency. Okay. So if you want to work with actuator, adding this dependency is mandatory. So by default, only health endpoint will be exposed. By default, only health endpoint will be exposed. We can expose other endpoints also by making changes in the properties file. Exclude and include. Exclude means remove them. Include means add them. We can expose other endpoints using below property in application.properties file. Okay. So in the application properties file, we are writing this configuration, guys. So here include is available, exclude is available, shutdown is available. Shutdown is a special endpoint which is used to stop the application or which is used to stop the server. It is mapped to post request. It is mapped to post request. So how do we send the post request to the server? We can use Postman for that. How to check what all the endpoints are enabled? Run the app to check note. Now localhost colon 8080/actuator. What is the purpose of this URL? What is the purpose of this URL? We can use the below URL to see what endpoints are exposed. We can use below URL to check what endpoints are exposed. Good. So to work with actuators, we need to add below form starter dependency. Actuator dependency we are adding. Okay. Then by default only health endpoint will be exposed. We can use below URL to check what endpoints are exposed. This is our URL to display that information. We can expose other endpoints using below property in the properties file. So here include star, exclude beans. All the endpoints will be included except beans. Can I exclude multiple? Yes, you can write like this. Beans comma health. Then those two endpoints will be excluded. Okay. Next one. Shutdown. It is a special endpoint. By default, it is in the disable mode. We need to enable that shutdown. What is the purpose of shutdown? What is the purpose of shutdown? Shutdown is a special endpoint. Shutdown is a special endpoint which is used to stop the server, and it is mapped to post request. To send the post request, we can download and install Postman. We can use the Postman tool. We can use Postman tool to send post request. From the browser directly, you can't send the post request. That's why we are downloading Postman tool in order to send the post request to the server. Are you guys clear with this one? So today we understood two concepts, guys. What are those two concepts? How to work with JSP as a presentation technology. How to work with JSP as a presentation technology in the web MVC. For that we are using Tomcat embed Jasper dependency. Then next one, how to work with actuators in the Spring Boot. Actuators are used to get production ready features of the application. They will help us in monitoring and managing our application. To work with the actuators, we need to add actuator starter in our form.xml. So once the actuator is enabled, we will see this URL to understand what are the endpoints are exposed. You can include or exclude the endpoints like this in the properties file. Shutdown is a special endpoint. Shutdown is a special endpoint. By using that, we can stop the application. So they made it little difficult to stop the server. If it is a GET request, anybody can send the request from the URL to stop the application. So they don't want to make it that much simple. That's why they binded the shutdown to post request. So if you want to send a post request, you should go to Postman tool and you can send the post request so that that server will be stopped. Application will be stopped. Sir, is there any endpoint available to start the server? No. Only for shutdown the endpoint is available. To start the server, endpoint is not available. So actuator endpoints. Good. Now today, so guys, with this, we understood Spring Core. We completed our discussion related to WebMVC. I will check any pending topics in the WebMVC for tomorrow. One annotation is there, model attribute. Someone is asking what is model attribute, init binding. Tomorrow I will work on that part. Okay. So as of now, we completed Spring Core and we completed Spring Boot. We completed data JPA and we completed WebMVC. Next, we need to start REST API. So any missing topics in the WebMVC, so you can send in the group that I will discuss for the tomorrow's class. And today task for you people, for this Spring Core, for Spring Boot, for data JPA, for WebMVC, we have uploaded interview questions. Okay. So if you go to Ashok IT YouTube channel, videos, popular videos, yeah, here top 100 Spring Boot and microservices interview questions are uploaded. In that, Spring Core available, Spring Boot available, data JPA available, WebMVC available, security available, microservices also available. Last two parts you can ignore. The first three parts you can watch. It is around 1.5 hour video. 100 questions and answers also we have explained in this video. So today I want you to complete your WebMVC practice and complete the assignments which I have given and go through this video. So here, these videos, we have explained what is the difference between controller, REST controller. These are related to what is front controller in the Spring WebMVC, what is dependency injection, okay, difference between constructor injection and setter injection, what are the life cycle methods in the Spring, advantages of MVC framework, what is cross origin concept in the Spring Web, right? Now difference between Spring Core and Spring MVC, what is difference between JPA and Hibernate, right? What is the difference between find by ID and get one method, what is the difference between SQL and HQL join queries, right? So the security part we have not covered as of now. Security part is not covered. Before security, whatever the topics are covered, those topics you can learn as of now. Got it? So first, first 1 hour video you can watch. So total 1.5 hour video is available. First 1 hour video you can watch. In that you will understand interview questions for all these 4 topics. Good? Fine. SBMS interview questions and answers. So these are frequently asked questions in the several interviews, guys. Please go through that. And assignments. In the JPA, I have given almost 10 assignments. In the WebMVC, I have given 4 assignments. So please work on those things and complete them. I told you, sending the email, 5 minutes a task. If you just type in the Google, how to send email using Spring Boot, you will get the code also. You need to understand that and you should be able to implement that in your project. So tomorrow is the last class for WebMVC. Any missing topics are there, I will check and we'll discuss on that WebMVC pending topics. Good. Thank you. With this, I'm stopping for today. We'll meet in the tomorrow session. Thank you, guys.